The question I have for you is, do you think that education these days in 2024 has become bottom of the priority list for coaches? And if so, why?
Much as it hates me or it pains me to say it, yes, the actual level of coaching is actually going the wrong direction.
If you want to scale a business and you want to be able to take your business online, when you're in a gym floor, you're competing against every trainer in the gym. That's it. You go online, you're competing against every trainer in the world.
I always think the people who are negative and the people who talk down upon other people in the industry, there's going to be a limit in terms of how far they can go and how long they're actually doing this for.
Going back to the original question again, has education become the bottom of the priority list? How many people are only getting their education from Instagram and YouTube?
I can think of 10 different reasons to use a meal plan. I can think of 10 different reasons to use it fit your macros. I can think of 10 different reasons to use structure, but it all depends on the person that's in front of you. Ultimately, that comes from education and knowing actually what to do with these different things.
So before we get started into round two, talking about hypertrophy with Alex here, I want you guys, if you're watching on YouTube, put in the comments who you actually think looks more sunburnt, because I definitely am more sunburnt. But Alex is in Australia, so he might look more red on camera, and he says his Zoom always does this to him.
To be fair,
Alex,
you're sitting there. You're sitting there in summertime. It is currently midwinter.
How cold does it get?
So I'm not gonna get my little violin out here. The coldest we've seen is maybe like 10 degrees. But at the same time, so what the big difference is we found so far is summertime. The little glimpse that we had when we first moved out. It's sunny most days. Like 2 days a month, it's a bit rainy. Here, it's like half the days will be miserable, and when it rains in Sydney, it goes big. Like, it's one of those ones where you stay inside all day because you are drenched otherwise, and the other days are like sunny and like late teens type thing.
It was the same in Hong Kong. We used to get a cold weather warning on your phone if it got below 20 degrees. Like, stay indoors, careful. And you found that like when it got cold, it was colder indoors than it was outdoors, because the aircon is everywhere. And when you got rain, we got like black rain. Like, we had like alerts of black, red, and amber rain. And black rain's horrible. I was in a taxi once, and it was so thudding down you couldn't see through the windscreen. And I'm like, how was this guy driving in this? It's horrendous, like typhoon levels of rain when you get it. But it's always hot.
Yeah, we've noticed the cold here as well, because I think every window everywhere is single glazed. The houses are made to cool you down. So yeah, we do the same thing. Like, you go outside and be like, oh, I can take my coat off now. Like, I can go back to being in my t-shirt and shorts type thing. But in answer to your question, you are definitely the most sunburnt. So hopefully people are going to agree with me on that one.
Yes, and I'll have a laugh, because I did this with Alex as well. And I've actually put it on my Instagram today, but I don't know when this is coming out. I've got a glasses gap. This is what, because if anyone's wondering why I got sunburn, I did it watching Wimbledon. So I'm not sitting on the beach with my glasses off and all this sort of stuff. I've got the farmer's tan. I've got the lines around everything. It's not good. Why did I get big frames? That doesn't help anybody.
I think big
going
frames
into our first question here, we have a topic we're going to talk about, but we started getting onto a bit of a tangent before we click record. And I think this will be you went. This needs to be on the live show. So the question I have for you is, do you think that education these days in 2024 has become bottom of the priority list for coaches? And if so, why?
So much as it hates me or it pains me to say it, yes. And I think it's really interesting how the industry's progressed over the last couple of years. I don't know if it's people moving from PT to online because of lockdown and getting stuck indoors with things, but it seems to be we're in a situation now where everyone, when they move into the online world, obviously as we are in, the first thing they decide to do at that point is like, right, I need to get good at sales. I need to get good at putting myself out there and essentially telling everyone how good I am. And they forget to do the actual point of just getting good in the first place. They seem to kind of forget that step of, I actually need to learn how to coach people here. So I think we're at a really weird time where there's so many coaches out there, but the actual level of coaching is actually going the wrong direction. We've almost got a lot of people who can talk a very good game, but they've, as you said, they've put education to the point of being like, I can do that a little bit later. I'm going to get good at marketing first, and I'll just kind of catch up as and when the time comes.
I think it's very easy to get caught up in the fact that you think the coaching industry is getting better because the peak is getting better. So, like, if we look at people like, if you look at who are the leaders in this field, we've got your Kassem Hansons, and you got your Jordan Shallows, and you got your Vince Pittsticks in the nutrition world, and your Jake Carters, and you got you guys in the bodybuilding space, and and you go, okay, like the industry's getting better. And then you forget, like, more coaches are coming into the funnel than ascending to that peak. So I think the peak's getting taller, but that base is getting wider, and it's getting wider quickly. And I've been trying to think of why it is that it's shifted so far away from education. And I don't think necessarily the fault is entirely at business mentors. I think we have I'm going to sound like an old fart here. We have a generation of people that want things more instantaneous than ever before. So they're like, us going to study now is us thinking about the coach we're going to be in 5 years. So it will always be a thing that's dropped off the to-do list if I need to do more outreach to get more clients in today. So I think that's part of it. It's that instantaneous thing. A business coach can promise, I will get you your first 3K in 90 days, or I work with you for free. Education, we can't create promises because we can tell everybody how to get a great result, but it relies on them applying it, how they communicate it, how they go about it. I also think that business mentor trend started it, that people now are seeing this as their clients such a transaction purpose. We're now seeing more coaches getting into the industry for money making rather than helping people. But then the educators leaned into it and started becoming also adding business mentorships. So we see it like the Institute of Health, Jake Carter. This is not calling out Jake. I think his products are probably amazing and very all-encompassing. But you now have people who were educators now talking business. So now when a new coach comes in, they get bombarded on Instagram algorithm with, you need to get leads. You need to get leads. This is how you get business. This is how you get business. This is how you get business. I think now, like, it seems like the natural thing. Like I said to you before we came on air, that I had coaches that asked me in their forums going, biggest thing I need is more leads. And I'm like, I've got to do the sales call with someone that says need more leads. And I've got to tell them right away that I'm not a business coach. And we have a chat, and it does very quickly, we realize where the gaps are in their business. Why aren't they getting leads? Because they're doing the outreach, right? They feel there's a shiny object. There's a shiny missing thing that's stopping them getting people through the door. And it's like, well, if someone goes onto your page and follows you, they follow you because your content is entertaining. The difference between following you and messaging you and going, hey, how much do you charge, is the results you produce. And very quickly they do that. They come into SMU or they come into ICM. And I bet you've had it as well, where people go, I didn't even realize how good an investment this was going to be. Like, it almost feels like education is hidden now in this realm of like, yeah, we know it's there, but people don't really see it as important. It's like, oh, I'll do it when I have time. And they come in and go, oh my God, I wish I'd done this sooner. Do you get the same thing?
Completely. Because I actually think it's quite a difficult time if you're a new coach in the industry, or say like just qualified, and you wanted to get into that online world because everyone else is doing it, and potentially the people that you follow are doing it, and your coach might, I don't know, whatever it might be. It's a really hard time because it's like, well, that's what everyone else is doing, and you kind of got to follow the crowd. You've got to sign up for a business mentorship within your first 6 months, and you've got to get things going. You've got to get things moving. You've got to leave your job. You've got to get a certificate when you come off the gym floor, and you don't have to PT anymore, even though if people spent more time PTing and actually did one-to-one hours, they'd probably get better at coaching anyway. That still counts education.
On that one-to-one PT thing, everyone wanting to go online. I've thought this for a while, right? Everyone's talking about self-employment and like ownership, and I don't know. I'm a self-employed person. I don't know how you guys work. If you're employed by ICM Pro Coach, or you're like an amalgamation of people sort of self-employed with a director share, but like there's a lot of people that I think don't have any desire really to be self-employed people. They just don't know what other options are out there. Like, how many people are generally creating careers for personal trainers to just do the job? We're looking at UP, and then there's lots of other ones, but they're so under the radar. Like, UP is known, and if you don't want to work for UP because it's not for everybody, we've both gone through that process, right? Then there's this thing that's like, well, I now need to find gyms in London and just hope they offer a good package. So I reckon there's people thinking there's no way out. The only option to make decent money is online, and they just jump into self-employment when actually they just would love someone to pay them a salary to do their job.
Yeah. And these are also the same people who probably got into the industry in the first place because they love training, they love being around people, they love being active, and they've basically given themselves a desk job where majority of the work they do is sitting down in the same chair, in the same room for multiple hours a day. And you kind of get to the point where you're like, why are you doing this? Like, what's happened?
I did the gym floor for 14 years. I came off and moved my business online and started SMU last June, July, right? And there's a number of things in here. There's move, and it's all the work of starting up a business, and my personal problems with my marriage at the moment. There's a lot of amalgamation to this, but there's never been an 8-month period where I've trained less. I've done less steps. And so like I'm in the worst shape I've been in for a very long time. And now, well, do I want that? Absolutely not. But I've done this for 14 years and I've kind of like, okay, I understand where my priorities are in this point in my life. But I know lots of people that have jumped into that thinking, I'll have more time to train. I'm like, you don't. Because when you're self-employed, unless your structure's really good and you're really good at blocking off time, you will find another thing to do. I'll train in an hour. I'll train at 6. I'll train at 9. Oh God, gym's shut. I'll do it tomorrow. And then you repeat the cycle again.
Yeah. It's like, how Instagram is essentially a highlights reel. So people share the good things that are happening. I think, I've never been part of a business mentorship, but I would imagine it's probably a similar thing where people get sold the dream a little bit when they're first kind of going into a program like that. And it's like, you can do this and you can automate everything, so you're not actually having to do that much work, and you can earn this amount of money, and these amount of people that have earned £10,000 in their first 6 months, whatever it might be. And it's like, yeah, but the reality of this is very, very different. And the people, the coaches who are at the very top of the tree in this industry have done that because they've worked harder than everyone else. They've done this for longer than everyone else. And it's almost, I heard a really interesting thing on a podcast last week where Elon Musk was interviewed, and they were talking about his brain and his life, and apparently he'd been asked or told in the past, they're like, oh, I wish I had your brain. I wish I had your life. I wish I had everything that came with it. Like, because they obviously see how much money he's got and they see the amount of success that he's had. And he was like, no, you don't. Trust me, you don't, because like, he's never switching off. Like, he's never relaxed. He's never present with people that he loves and the people that are around him. And it's like, the good bits might be very damn good, but the other bits that you have to do to come alongside it to get to that point are the things that people aren't going to want to do, realistically.
Well, that's the thing, right? People want to be the Tiger Woods, but they don't want the years of practice and the brutal grind of it. And I think when you're saying about the business mentorships, I think you can automate. Like I'll say this: once during my personal issues, when I had that initial first week separated from my wife, I was just trying to keep my head above water. So I was like, and I was trying to work on myself and just be this, like, whenever I did have a conversation, I'd be like, look how amazing I am. So I got myself some clothes and I made sure the flat was clean. I was like, and I did the bare minimum that I needed. I showed up for my clients. I did my one-to-one calls and my group calls. My business didn't drop off at all. Quality, not even in the slightest. And you realize how much stuff as a business owner that is just fluff. So really, if I didn't need any help getting leads, I didn't need to work on the business or create content, I would have a 5-hour work week. So you could absolutely do it. But I think what people often lose out on here is there's twofold. I think they compare themselves to people. Like, I compare the amount of time that I make content and all the quality of my content to people like Metabolic Mental University or people like Jake Carter. And then you peek behind the curtain and you go, they've got a team of 5-10 people. So I can't compare my output and the quality of my content to the quality of their content. I need to compare myself to the quality of my content a month ago, right? And also the fact that, like, okay, they've got 5-10 people. Do I want to be in charge of 10 people's salaries? Do I want to be able to be the person responsible then putting food on their table, and paying for their kids' mortgage and whatever else they're paying their money for? But I also think it's like coaching clients, business mentorships. I see a lot of people in business mentorships that probably say, this business mentorship was a waste of money. Are you in Fit Pro Mentorship Review, the Facebook group where they review business mentors, like, anonymously? And you can't be a mentor if you're a mentor, you can't be a part of it.
That sounds well fun.
Some of it's great. It's really useful if you see people selling the dream and you're like, okay, is this person legit or they selling a rubbish product? But the amount of times I see people in there that go, don't get this business mentor. I paid 10 grand, didn't get what I asked for. They just kept telling me to send cold DMs. They just kept telling me to message more people. And I didn't want to do that. It goes against my principles. So it's rubbish. Don't do it. Okay. You've got 100 followers, right? And you want to grow a business. It's like saying, don't go with Pro Coach. They just asked me to be in a calorie deficit. And I don't like calorie deficits. So you see people often moan because they don't want to do the work. of doing the thing that requires a business. I think you can automate your business and work less if you're incredibly organized and you get the stuff done that you need to. The problem is most of us faff around with stuff.
Yes.
But bring it back. Go on.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, I think to get to a level also where you're automating your business and you're living that dream, you have to have done the time beforehand to actually get to that state too. Like you have to have done this for so long and got to the point where you're so good that you can almost like allow yourself to step back a little bit. But I also think the people who are at that level don't want to step back anyway. Yeah. Like I always use Cal as the example of this stuff. Like I've worked alongside Cal for the last 5 years, and I think everyone knows how good he is. But it's only when you're close to him you realise just how good he is and just how hard he works. Like he's been through stages in his life where he would genuinely work from 8 a.m. until 2 a.m. He'd sleep for 6 hours and he'd do the same thing again every single day. And if I did that for 2 days, I would break and I'd be in absolute pieces. And Georgie, bless her, would be like, you need to get some sleep and go outside. But he could do that for a year and hold himself at that level and keep himself at that point. And it's like some people are just at that point where they can work at that point and they're willing to work at that point and they'll get to the highest level. But for him stepping back, it's probably never going to happen because he's just wired that way.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I also think as well, like when it comes to being able to step back, you mentioned being good, and that comes in every avenue of your business, right? If you want to scale a business and you want to be able to take your business online, when you're in a gym floor, you're competing against every trainer in the gym. That's it. When you go online, you're competing against every trainer in the world. So if you're a new coach coming into the online space, wanting to get guys in phenomenal shape, you are competing with the Callum Raystricks of the world, right? He's buying for the sort of the same clients depending on the level you're at or who you want to work with. So I think that every aspect of that business needs to be good. So to scale online, you need to be such a good coach in person, or at least be such a good coach helping people for free online that you've got a proven commodity to then be able to scale that. Otherwise, the lead gen tactics aren't going to work. It's like I did, and then even in the outreach, I hired a Filipino VA, worst investment I've ever made in my business. Not because she's a bad VA, although I don't think she was a great VA, but it was my fault because I hadn't done the work and the time to get good at converting people in the DMs. I couldn't teach this woman to speak like me. I couldn't convert people from DM to sale call to sale myself. So how on earth would I expect this woman that doesn't speak English as her first language to do it for me? So it's like, before you try and run, can you walk effectively? And this is the thing that I find, and including myself, I'm not sitting there, you coaches are terrible. Like I'm as equally as bad as this. But I think the problem at the moment is that education doesn't seem like the obvious answer, whereas to us it is. And I'm like, what can we do as an education industry to showcase better the importance of this sort of stuff? Because I told you off air, and I won't tell you the name, but I had someone who was wanting to sign up with me for months and months and months on end. We have a mid to low ticket product. It's like 300 quid, super cheap. I said, hey, I don't know if you've seen, because that's the way the algorithm works, but we've got this offer. It might be a good kickstart for you if you're still interested. He goes, I'd love to, but I've just signed up for therapy and I can't afford both. Now, that's fair. And there's an episode that'll either come out just before this or come after this where I bang on about how good therapy is. I have therapy. In fact, recently I've had 2, right? I'm a huge fan of it, and I think it's worth the investment. I have therapy with the same company that he gets therapy. But I just saw through this message of just like, this is a person that's gone, newish coach, gone into business mentorships, struggled to get leads, probably felt inadequate. Struggling to get results, probably felt inadequate. Clients aren't doing the work, probably felt inadequate. Now his check-ins are probably less frequent because you can't communicate with them well enough to get the check-ins in. And then he gets burnt out. And rather than thinking, maybe if I got better at my job, I'd get more check-in adherence, I'd be able to get more results, I'd have more pride in my work. You go, nah, it must be my head. I need to get my head sorted first, and that'll be the answer. And I'm like, I'm not saying it won't, but I'm saying, like, if you go and get your head sorted, and then you come back to a business that's not producing results, you're going to go back into that hole so fast. I think, because I look at a colleague of mine called Kevin Hoare, who said burnout doesn't exist. Many years ago, me calling him out, and then he got really burnt out. But what I will say about Kevin, when he actually hit burnout, it was burnout. because he loved his career. He still does it. If anything, when he left GP, he's done more of it and got into more obsessed with it. And he got to the point where he was just working so hard and just did so many sessions that he just hit a wall. He wasn't at the early stage of career. He just immersed himself in the product, and he probably worked. He did the Callum stints. How does Callum do that and not get burnt out? It's not because he has some superior mindset to me or you. Is that he probably doesn't. He will consider it as work. It's not like sitting on the beach with a margarita, but he really enjoys doing it.
Yes,
and that's the difference.
Yeah. And he's that good at it that. Not that he's not having to overthink things, but he can make decisions and make choices like that because a problem comes up with him. He's probably seen it before. He's knowledgeable enough and experienced enough to be able to overcome it for someone, and he just tells them what to do. Rather than being in a situation where someone doesn't know what to do in that same point, and then being like, "Oh my god, I'll make up this thing and hope it works," and then being stressed for the next week in case it doesn't. Yeah, it's such a funny state at the minute as well because. I had a similar situation with a guy that I'm working with at the minute where we were on a call last week and he's 6 months into working online and we were going through his consultation process and kind of new client comes towards him, what happens, like show me everything that he goes through with a new potential person. We have this first call, we chat about things, then he shows them it was a 17-page slideshow presentation about all the different things they're going to get within coaching, about what the newfound confidence they're going to get and what that leads to, a bit about his background. And I was like, mate, that is fantastic. But do you want to know what I do? And I was like, I jump on a call with them. I show them what they're going to get. I show them how everything works. And I was like, how many people sign up? And he was like, yeah, they sometimes do. And I was like, I think I probably had one person not sign up from that. And I was like, it doesn't come from the detailed nature of what's in the call. It's just the actual backing behind it. When you actually tell them what they're going to get and you know it's damn good, they're probably going to sign up because it carries weight behind it. Rather than just being at a point where you're like, oh, but how about this extra stuff? And no, I promise you're going to get all these things because people see through that straight away.
What does that show as well? And I've been that person that's lost sales calls because I've tried to oversell my product, and it shows a lack of conviction and confidence in what you do. So, like when I increased my price point to what it is now in SMU, I had that a little bit. Even though I had the track record, even though I knew I could do it, it's just first time I started a business, wasn't 100% sure I could do this full time. I'd never run this sort of model before, so I oversold features. But even in that explanation, you were like, I've only had one person not sign up for that. There was so much confidence in that. And when we look at most of our communication being non-verbal, that's the difference. If I can sit on a sales call, listen to your problems as a coach, and then I can go, right, let's brainstorm some ideas. And I help you for free. And I go, right, here's how I think I can help you further. Take it or leave it. We don't need it. We don't need your money if you don't want it. It's so different to someone being like, and you get this, and you get this, and then we check on Monday, and then I'll touch base on Wednesday, and then you get this pro PDF, and then you get these recipe guides, which don't get me started. I hate recipe guides. I hate them. I think they're one of the worst. They're the worst thing. But
you can have a McDonald's breakfast with 300 calories.
Oh my god! Anyone that says that, do you know what they never have on their page? Results.
Exactly.
Never. And it's this trend at the moment. We're going off on a big tangent here, but this trend at the moment where everyone is trying to fit everything into macros, and if you don't look at a carb for 20 minutes, you're going to develop an eating disorder. Like I got into a bit of a debate with somebody on the comments of the Fitness Chef, the guy that slides in 80s music and shirts, and every post, there's no balance. The problem I have is every post. You can eat this Twix for the same as this banana. You could eat this Nutella sandwich for the same as this chicken breast. Like, okay, I get it. But he also said once, you will develop an eating disorder if you diet hard. I'm like, okay, let's break this down. All the people I've had come to me for coaching over the years, they've done crazy fad diets, low carb, they've done high carb, they've done keto, they've done fasting. And they don't come to me still doing those things because they're scared of not doing those things. Don't get me wrong, those people exist, and I feel sorry for anyone that has a bad relationship with food. I really do. But most of them is us as the fitness professionals that have gone to the next level. Most of our clients have done these diets, gave up on these diets, and gone back to the way they were eating before, which means they didn't have a disordered way of eating because they wouldn't have gone back.
Yeah.
Most people eat too many crisps. They're not scared of crisps. Most people need simplicity in their diet. I would rather give someone 2 super shakes and 2 meals per day. When I say super shakes, like pad them with some fiber and some fruit and some stuff like that, because it's 2 meals to food prep, as opposed to giving someone 5 meals that you need to prep, or worse. Here's your macros. I know you don't know anything about food, but I'll see you next week.
It's awful. Yeah, this is why I've spoken about, and we actually had a post in the ICM about meal plans, because meal plans got to a point where everyone was like, "Oh, well, you should never use them," and this is why I never give my clients meal plans, because it like you said, it ruins their relationship with food, and it leaves them with so limited choice they can't eat anything. And like, these are people who think like a Tesco meal deal is a valid breakfast, and it's like we need to actually get people eating some slightly better quality food, and by telling them what to eat, which is what a meal plan is, we can probably do that. It doesn't have to be chicken, rice, and broccoli 8 times a day, and that's the meal plan. It's just think.
Yeah,
like
that's the same thing. That's literally what people think meal plans are. Like you got macros, or you got chicken and broccoli. Like I can make a meal plan with fitting in anything. And people say meal plans don't teach you anything. Well, food volume, portion size, structure, right? And that's just off the top of my head. There's a bunch of stuff here. I would say macros don't teach you anything unless you actually arm that with education of how to use them. Like, and the argument, whenever I've now come back with this, rather than trying to compete with coaches that tell me meal plans don't teach me anything, I just come back with, do you give training plans? Yes. Because I've never seen anyone go, because by that logic, right, training plans don't teach you anything. What I'm going to give you is total tonnage numbers, and you're inclusive with exercises, and you put the exercise in that fits your tonnage, if it fits your tonnage.
Mate, if it fits your tonnage, it's a go now. Just give them a training split and a total amount of weight to lift and go.
Do you think, going back to that first question to a degree, do you think most of the, some coaches are going to hate me for this, but do you think most of the anti-meal plan rhetoric is down to the fact that coaches don't know how to make them and aren't educated enough to use them, so they've latched onto what other people have said? One coach says they don't teach you anything, and that's going to be the thing that justifies them not investing or spending the time, investing time or money, it doesn't have to be a mentor, in learning how to use meal plans.
Completely. I was actually going to say that a second ago, because all this stuff comes down to application, how you use it. And ultimately, that comes from education and knowing actually what to do with these different things. Like I can think of 10 different reasons to use a meal plan. I can think of 10 different reasons to use it that fits your macros. I can think of 10 different reasons to use structure, but it all depends on the person that's in front of you and what's actually going to suit them the best. And I think if you're less educated, it's very easy to look at things. And this is from a less educated fitness kind of aspect. It's very easy to look at things and just find something that's wrong with it, and almost like that be your content and that be your narrative. And you kind of go, well, don't do this because of this reason. And it's like, yeah, but that's not helping anyone. That's not actually adding anything to the industry or adding anything to your clients. Can you actually find a justifiable reason to do it and then actually do it with them and then teach them? But this is where, because as we said before, like that education side of things within coaching is going further and further down the chain. People don't know this stuff, and it's just becoming a game of Chinese whispers, where it's like, oh, I heard this person say this thing, and then someone else said it after them, and then someone else said it after them, and now I'm going to say it. It's like, yeah, but you haven't got a clue why that first person said it in the first place. You're just repeating the same words.
Do you think the responsibility lies on us as the people that have been in this game for a little while to do better, particularly with our Instagram content? Because one of the things I really hate at the moment is the reaction video trend. Now, I'm not saying I don't like doing it, but I don't say there's never a time for it. I think if you've got big accounts that are conning people into buying bad information, then that's fair. But what I've seen now, because it does so well on Instagram, I see coaches knocking people that are new. Like I saw somebody knock somebody who was like a coach that's been there like 24 years old, brand new coach, because he didn't like know the moment arm of an exercise. And I'm like, there's a few things with this. One, that coach generally isn't doing this to con people like the person you originally started doing this style of content for was, right? He's trying to do his best. He's trying to learn. If you look back at your content, you would have made mistakes, right? So like give that person a break. And also like your whole narrative is that I'm trying to stop people go with bad coaches. most people, the moment arm of a bicep curl isn't going to be the thing that stops Susan seeing her abs. You know, like we're knocking people for stuff that's just, it's just there to be negative. And when you, not only does that potentially scare off new coaches from making content and putting stuff out there because they feel they're going to be set on by these bigger accounts, but on your point, it's like, if we teach people that how you get successful is by knocking things, that people don't actually, and younger, like 21-year-old coach, they don't know. They're new to this world. They've just come out of university, if they went to university, and now they're trying to piece together how to get results. And they say, oh, well, that's bad, and that's bad, and that's bad. They're taught to look for the negatives and things. We're encouraging this behavior rather than saying, carnivore is bad for you because of X, Y, and Z. Well, how about someone with a big autoimmune condition that does react to plant defense chemicals and does react to certain pesticides on food, right? So instead of saying, or someone that doesn't like vegetables, which is way more common, rather than going, do you know what, we can take some of the good stuff about this carnivore diet. Do you not like veg? No. Do you like liver? Cool. Do you like a greens powder? Cool. We'll do this for now, or maybe try and work on this later. We've just gone, no, sorry, you need to eat your vegetables. And then you create this narrative with your client that you're fighting an uphill battle because you're always combative.
Yes, but that's actually a really interesting way of looking at it, though. But because I think the issue isn't actually with people who've been in this industry for years and years, and I don't think it's people who are in it brand new as well. Because, like I said, it's a difficult time to come into the industry. I actually think a lot of the issue comes from the people who are in the middle ground, where they've been doing this a handful of years. They potentially see themselves as being better than the new people and almost on a par with the very, very top of the tree. And so they speak down upon those new people, but they don't fully understand what they're actually talking down to them about. It's like, I remember a really interesting thing in the UP days where there was a client who used to come in, and I can't remember exactly which country he was from, but he was from royal family of a very wealthy country, and he was as rich as anyone you'd ever come across. But he was also one of the nicest dudes ever, and you would never know. He was super humble, super polite. He'd come in and say hello to everyone, say a big thank you, all these amazing different things. And he could just be a normal person in the street. But it was really interesting because there were two other people who were from the same country, also very wealthy, but they weren't quite as wealthy. And they were the opposite. They were arrogant. People didn't like them. They talk down upon you and almost show you that they were better than you because they had more money, because they were a little bit spiteful. They weren't quite at the top yet. And that's where I think this almost this negative tone from the industry comes from. And I guess it's a bit hypocritical of me to say this. I'm being negative upon the negativity, but this is where it comes from. It's people who've been doing this for a certain period of time, and they're like, oh, you newbies shouldn't do this for this reason. It's they're just following the people they've seen so far. They don't know anything yet. They're still new.
I wonder when that stops, though. I think there's an interesting, where does that middle ground, where do you become the top tier? I don't think it's necessarily based around quality. I think it's based around your mentality. Because, I have people that would consider me in that top rung in a way, because I run a business mentoring coaches. I've been in this for 15 years, a mentor coach for 8 years. But I'm not at Dr. Jordan Shallow or Dr. Michael Sotell or Callum Raystrick in terms of, if you're looking at Insta fame at the very least, And so where does that stop? Why is it that I'm still in the middle ground, really? If you look to who I'm comparing myself to, it's a mentality of, I will never say something's right or wrong or an obsolete. I will open a discussion. I think there is a little bit of social media is this gets likes, and then what gets likes becomes the way you communicate, and what gets likes becomes the way you educate, because you now know we're in this attention economy where our studying isn't to open our mind and create spark discussion. Our studying is to, if we do any of it, is to make more content. And I know there's a lot, going back to the original question again, has education become the bottom of the priority list? How many people are only getting their education from Instagram and YouTube? I know coaches that their only coaching education is the little bit the business mentor does, and then YouTube and Instagram. So this is what they learn. They learn the tribalism and nothing else. I did an episode with Rob McGeary, obviously a mutual friend of both of us. And
one of the greatest men in the entire world.
100%, 100%. And we did our fitness industry predictions for 2024. And one of mine, it's quite funny actually, I'll send you the episode of this. But one of mine was, the term misinformation will become the buzzword of 2024. And I'm already proven right. Everyone is talking about misinformation. And it's something I said in that show, which I couldn't get out of my head. I went, if you don't know the information, you have no right to put a miss in front of it. How many people don't know? How many people criticize others, right? Because of they're saying something that is not just calorie deficit and progressive overload. And I'm like, okay, make a reel telling me how lipolysis works.
Yeah.
And like, you don't need to know it, but you should, right? It's like, if I don't need my open heart surgeon to know about my other organs in the body, as long as you can do it, you can read the instruction manual well. But I'd really prefer it if he did.
Yeah, but that's also the same thing. It's because it's easier to be the negative voice rather than the positive voice. That's the route that people will go down instead. And I think I actually really like that, and you're absolutely right. And I think it's probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets better over these next few months. But the only thing I think with that, in terms of almost like when it stops, so when do people get to that high level, is I always think the people who are negative and the people who talk down upon other people in the industry, there's going to be a limit in terms of how far they can go and how long they're actually doing this for. Because we actually joked about this at the start, didn't we? About how we're both in the education sphere. Obviously, you got in there before we did with the ICM, but how it's actually pretty nice that there's a group of people who want to help each other, want to teach together, rather than being in a situation where it's like, oh, it's cutthroat and kind of at each other's throats. And there are none of those people who are constantly talking down and undermining people that are actually getting to that highest level, because they don't push themselves to get there, and no one actually likes them in the first place. That's the only thing that helps me, because I'm like, if someone's good at this and they care, they'll always do well. If someone is neither of those two things, they're going to have a shelf life.
It's interesting when you talk about the shelf life. I see a good thing coming and a bad thing coming, and both of them are directly related to us and our markets now. The good thing is I think we're going to see this shift in coaches wanting to upskill again. And the reason why I think this is because the more the market gets saturated with online coaches, the more it gets saturated with online coaches that don't really know how to get results. And you often find these people have like 3 video editors, but no budget for education. And the problem is with these things, and this is what I'm very passionate about, is you have really, really good coaches. Like we spoke about before we clicked on air, we don't know anything about marketing, right? And we're learning this as we go. We will get lost in the shuffle compared to these people that don't know what they're doing, but have big marketing budgets. Right. So I think we've got a lot of great coaches that are really struggling to make ends meet because they don't understand the business side of it, even though they are actually the best coaches out there. I think that shift will start to happen where more people get burnt by bad coaches. More people will have heard the DM scripts and will see through them. And while everyone wants to hate on Diver CEO, I think Diver CEO will eventually create a catalyst where more clients understand words like autophagy or microbiome, and they're going to start asking questions of their coach. And if their coach doesn't understand anything but calorie deficit, they're going to be like, ugh. So that's the good. There's going to be a shift eventually where the good coaches will start to rise. They'll get more sales and leads because people, they will hold up to questioning, and the bad coaches will struggle. And the problem with that, when anything starts to rise, there are going to be more people jumping on the bandwagon. What you said there about it's good that there's more people in the space that we're in, and that we don't see it as competition, and it's good to collaborate. And when you get to that level, people don't tend to hate. I think we're also going to see more and more people jumping on the coaching education bandwagon that are in that middle ground, that feel that they've done a couple of years on the gym floor, that now they can be the educator. And what really worries me about that, because I know you've done a massive stint on the gym floor, you've done a massive stint online, you've done a massive stint now educating and going into that more. I've done 14 years, or 8 years of that has been mentoring. I've already seen sponsored ads come up for coaches that I look at their content and they're advertising to coaches and how to get better results for the clients. And I look at some of the stuff and I'm like, oh God, I haven't seen the product, but I'm dreading this. And I think those people will be the people that then start knocking down. I think this trend will go up to educators soon. I think there'll be reaction videos about educators, which really scares me, because that also makes it fair, open game. Because if you're judging a coach based off their content, that's one thing. But if you're judging a coach based off their coach's capabilities, that's another thing. So that means like you could have someone go through the ICM, apply things badly, make a mistake, client complains, and then an educator does a reaction video to you because they want to take down Callum Racetrick's company. That is what scares me, because that's not your fault, or in the same way it wouldn't be my fault. But I see that's going to be the next negative trend in the industry. More people trying to jump on the education space.
That's really interesting perspective. I've never thought of that. I guess it's almost like the kind of like the last untapped market in terms of where the negativity's got to.
Yeah.
It's almost like that's where it could be those same folk who've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, talking down upon other people, kind of go, well, where am I at now? Who am I competing with? Who am I going to speak negatively about? Oh, it's only this person left.
And it's, if you think that people wouldn't do it in that space, how many people knock Charles Poliquin? I see more people knocking Charles, may he rest in peace, than talk about the vast, overwhelming amount of good things that he does. If you studied all of Charles's work, you'd be a better coach than a bad coach.
Yes.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah. But because it's very easy to talk down about how some of this stuff is potentially a bit outdated, that's the route people can go down instead.
And it's interesting as well, interesting as well, when we talk about Charles, the biggest one he gets is that it's overselling supplements. Don't be wrong. Some of the dosages of these supplements were there to sell a product.
You mean 30 grams of omega-3 a day?
Yeah. Like 5 to 10 essential amino acid tablets between each set.
Love that.
But it's amazing people go, well, that's rubbish because spot reduction doesn't exist. Okay. Let's say spot reduction doesn't exist. It's not entirely true, but I get it. Okay. Spot storage does. So if you're losing over the whole body, where are you putting it back? Because you're always in a balance between fat storage and fat breakdown. So if I'm losing it from everywhere, including maybe my man boobs, if I'm not putting it back on the man boobs, guess what's going to look leaner? The man boobs. And that will come down to a hormonal difference, right? Anyone that thinks that's not true in any way, shape, or form, see a woman with bigger legs, see a bloke with like boob fat, for any use of a better term. These things are real. It's like, yes, it's not the biggest lever to pull, but like if you go, some people go, I don't understand it, so it's wrong. I was like, there's lessons in this. It really is. Yeah. And if Menno put a study up saying spot reduction was real, you'd probably share it on your stories.
Yes. Yeah. But look at me. But also, these people haven't tried this stuff as well. That's also the thing with it as well. It's like, you said that people can't use the term misinformation if they don't understand the information in the first place. I also think you can't say something doesn't work unless you've actually tried it on yourself and it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. And you can't talk negatively upon something that you don't fully understand.
That's the trend. Is why I don't really like the evidence-based. I still a term completely like evidence-informed. Because it's like, if you understand the pathways, if you understand how stuff works, like if you understand exercise mechanics and you understand hormone pathways and how lipolysis works, then you use science to work out what's statistically significant. So science would tell you that fasted cardio isn't necessarily hugely superior to fed cardio. Okay. But if I look at the pathway, fat is lost when insulin is low. So to mobilize fat, you mobilize fat at stress, you lose it at rest. Right? So if to actually oxidize fat, you need insulin to be low. So people go, oh, well, does that mean I need to be on a low carb diet? No, it doesn't. But it means that could a low carb period in your day or a low carb diet for a period of time create a little bit of a benefit? Sure. And now, who are you working with? Are you working with bodybuilder Steve that's looking to get his last 2% off before he hits stage? Or are you looking at Susan that likes a yogurt for her breakfast and normally just like binges in the evening? Like, there is levels to this stuff. And I always look at that argument about sort of low carb and sort of like what's going to be better for mobilizing body fat is like creatine loading. I could load creatine for a week and get it saturated in the muscles and it would start taking effect ever so slightly faster, right? Or I could take 5 grams a day and it will just get there eventually. I could do a keto diet and I will use fat preferentially faster. Or I could just be in a caloric deficit and there'll be periods of my day which are relatively low because they have to be because you're burning more fuel than you're moving. And you'll get there pretty soon after. Like when you zoom out a year, doesn't make much difference. But in a week, potentially could make some difference. So this is I think this is the fun bit about education. It's like, what are the tools I can play? What are the levers I can use? What can I do to work around this client to help them with this target? Rather than going, I'm waiting for a Menno study to decide whether I act on anything.
Exactly, yeah.
And I like Menno, by the way. No disrespect to Menno.
or just saying it depends to everything. and having zero clue about what it actually depends on. But because
Yes.
you've heard it depends, you're like, well, I can't give an answer, so it depends. And like, yeah, but what 6 things are you actually thinking about to actually make that choice in the first place? That's because I always joke on my stories because, like, say I do a Q&A box and someone asks a question about a certain situation, and obviously you've never got enough details to actually really give a proper answer. So I end up doing like 3 minutes saying, okay, it depends. If you're this, then do this. If you're this, then do this. If you're this, then do this. Because that I completely agree. That's the fun thought process that we go through, and that's the best bit. It's almost like debating in your head and problem solving in your head. You've got one side here, and like, oh, we could do this and this would happen. Oh, but we could do this and then this would happen. And it's like, right, what's going to win? And that's what we're going to do.
Yes.
But if you don't make that debate and you don't kind of go down that route, then you're just like, well, let's just do whatever we think.
Yeah,
Which exactly. People do.
So to go into some of that, like obviously we've spoken about an upcoming guest lecture you're going to do for SMU, which is going to be like getting jacked for the average Joe. So what do you think coaches get wrong when it comes to building muscle? We see so much talk about mechanical tension and failure and length and range, what all these studies say. In your opinion, what are people missing out on when it comes to actually getting muscle on regular clients, not bodybuilders?
People miss the basics far too frequently because they associate their client with being in the exact same position that they are in. Like, say, for example, if you or I went to the gym, or we had in fact, we have a 6-month stretch of time, we're trying to build as much muscle as we can. There are going to be so many intricacies we're going to look at because we're at a point now where realistically, that's what it's going to take for us to build muscle. But if I've got someone that's been training for 2 years and their eating is super inconsistent and they don't even like going to the gym, and there's all these other different things that are holding them back, like whether or not we're tracking trace protein is irrelevant because the simple things that they need to be doing a little bit better are going to be the most important parts. But people kind of go to that last step because they're like, oh, I really like the details and I love doing those things for me, so that person's going to need the same thing as well. And it's like, no, just can we get them training consistently? Can we get them training progressively? And can we get them training well? Perfect. That's all they need. What's actually they're doing, to a certain extent, doesn't matter. Let's just get that foundation in place first. Let's get food at a point where food quality is high enough, and enough being the important word. Let's get them eating consistently enough. Great. And let's actually get them sleeping like an adult so they're getting 8 hours a night rather than being up until 2 o'clock in the morning. And for a lot of the time, people, that's all they need. But I think people because they take so much enjoyment in their own stuff, they don't want to think about those boring bits. But actually, it's the boring bits that people are missing out on.
What's the most common leaps that people are making? What are the things that you see in programs that people are trying to master the advanced stuff before they walk? What's the things that you notice the most?
Exercise selection is big at the minute. I think that stems, again, you said people will get their education from Instagram. People will see the perfect way of doing a iliac fiber biased lat row, and they'll be like, oh, sweet, this person needs it. Like, no, they don't. This person doesn't even understand what tempo is. Let's actually get them controlling that weight first. And let's get that in place, and then everything else can start to follow.
Here's something for people that have got into that trap, and I'm not only have been in that trap, but to some degree still am. I still nerd out on all the anatomy stuff. I love it. Oh, yeah. But here's the thing I think. People talk about like iliac. Well, let's talk about the pec because apologies for audio listeners, but I'm going to have my skeleton on the screen, right? But
Bony Tony's coming out.
If we look at like your pec, right? We've got your clavicular fibers, your sternal fibers, your costal fibers, and then people are like, I need to line something up for each of those things. I'm like, okay, I teach that too. I think that makes sense. But these things don't really actually exist. People talk about divisions. It's a spectrum. It's just a span of fibers that goes from here to here. So, I need to line up my clavicular fibers. Well, what if I line up something that's here? Have I not got it? Am I now somewhere between the two? I'm not tapping each face. I'm just slightly less this fibers. I'm maybe now more in this direction. So something vaguely here, something vaguely here, and something vaguely down over the course of a block. Not even a phase. You could do like, I see some people trying to go, I need to get each division in every phase. I'm like, you're going to have 1 million exercises here. Like every fan-shaped muscle, you're trying to breach every division. That's like 4 or 5 exercises for the glutes. There's probably about 3 for pecs and about another 3 or 4 for lats. Like that's just in one block. Never let anything else. It's like, it doesn't even exist.
Yeah. And again, the implementation falls down because it's like, okay, you've set up an exercise to bias your clavicular pec. The other two fibers are still working. They don't just suddenly switch off. Like, maybe you just do one press and set it up well that someone can do, and they can control load, and they're strong there, and they enjoy doing it. That may be enough for someone. You don't have to go down into the nth degree.
In this position, all the fibers of the pec work anyway.
Yeah,
because they're all wrapping around. They all have a big advantage. So, it's if you're buying into the length and range stuff as well, then you probably less need to buy into the division stuff.
Yeah.
So,
what's
and
your
then
take on the length and range stuff? Because obviously,
do you know what? That was one of my questions in here. Emily was. My take on the length and range stuff. I think people have jumped on a bandwagon too quickly. I don't think we have enough research to kind of go, yes. I think we're having enough now that maybe bias lengthened to mid ranges, but it's more application. So what we got to think of here, that most of the lengthened to mid range exercises are the stuff that's most loadable, right? We've also got to then think, like what's going to be closer to take to failure. So if I've got a length and range challenge that's not loadable, that can't be taken to failure. Let's say even like a back squat, right? Great if you're suited to a back squat and you've got the proportions for it and it hits the muscles you want to. But unless you're a crazy motherfucker, you ain't taking that to failure. So I'd rather take a more mid-range hack where I can go close to failure than that back squat. And I'm not thinking about what's more stretch. I think that I'm not saying the research is wrong with it. I'm saying that people have gone so far that can I make every exercise more stretch? I think that's where it gets a bit silly. Like I'm on a leg extension. Hold on. That's not optimal. I need to lean back to get more rec fem. You want a shorten range challenge. Leg curls, when people put a pad under your hips. Just do an RDL. Like you're making a shorten range just slightly less shorten range. You're not making a lengthen range challenge by putting a pad on your hips on an RDL. So I think those things get silly. And again, it also comes down to application. So you're saying there's never a time and a place to a shorten range? You're saying you can't build muscle on shorten ranges? And like we both know that you can. And what if you've got a client that sleeps 2 hours a night and is super stressed at work? It's easier to recover from shorten range stuff. So if I've got someone is really stressed in their life at the moment, like my program, I do one big mid to length range exercise at the moment, and I do a lot of short range stuff. Why? Because I've got a lot of stuff going on personally and professionally. I'm not going to recover, and my diet's not as good. So I'm not going to recover as well from doing loads more stuff. So, for example, if I had somebody who was doing 2 sets of hack squat, and then I went up to 3, and then I want to create more progressive overload, I went up to 4, but they couldn't recover from 4, right? I would rather do 3 sets of hack and then add a leg extension.
Yeah.
It's suboptimal from a length perspective, but from a recovery perspective, it's better.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
Which is based off the person that's in front of you and actual coaching. Yeah, my approach is exactly the same thing. I think because people love an extreme, it's been taken to far too much of an extreme. Like, I think I've seen videos of people doing exercises where, say, for example, they're doing an entire set where it's just length and range partials. And I'm like, be honest with me. Can you tell me there's actually a difference between them doing that compared to just doing a normal set? It's like, there isn't going to be at the end of the day. Like, for me, when I was going through things and reading up about it, I was like, the majority of the benefit that I think most people are going to see from this is taking a set to failure. And if you want to get some more length and range work in there, find an exercise where you can do partials in that length and range, where you just wouldn't be able to get the muscle short anyway.
Yeah.
Which isn't particularly new. Like, there's bodybuilders who've been doing this for years and then been like, well, we've been doing this for 20 years. And we didn't need a paper to tell us that it works because they're 120 kilos and lean.
There's two things I would see this. When I've looked at some of the studies that have gone into length and range stuff, here's 2 things that I tend to see. You either see people doing length and range partials at the end of a set. So is it the length that caused the extra hypertrophy or the fact that you took it closer to failure? That's the extra hypertrophy. The other thing I tend to see is that some studies do consider this and they will compare just the length and range, like a press like this, to a full range press. But what they don't then consider is maybe reverse banding said press, so it's hard throughout the whole range of motion. So what you're comparing is the bottom third where it's challenging, staying in that challenge, and a full range where half of it is pointless. So we don't see I then can see why they go, oh well, you only need to do the lengthen thing. Okay, but like if I manipulated that profile to make sure that it was brutal all the way, and this is why I see a lot of people go shit on reverse banding. And again, I think reverse banding is a great analogy for you're talking about here in terms of application, because people go to both extremes. We got people that are saying your client doesn't like the gym. Could you put more bands and a sex swing on a Smith machine, right? And then you've got the other people that go, reverse banding's awful. We want more load in the stretch, not less. And I'm like, oh, you're missing the point. We're not having any less load in the stretch position. We're just creating something where we actually create load throughout the whole range, right? So we put the same amount of weight on, right? Because if you reverse banding something, you should put more weight on the blooming thing.
Yeah.
We're not making it easier or making it more brutally hard. And I think that's where this is, people are throwing the baby out with the bathwater because they don't know how to read a study, for one, and they don't understand what actually contributes to hypertrophy, for two.
Yes. Or how to train as well. That's the thing. Because this actually has to be put into the gym at the same point.
Should beginners train to failure?
What's that, sorry?
Should beginners train to failure?
I think they should train to their perceived level of failure, which is different to what our perceived level of failure is.
Oh, that's such a good answer.
Clip that. So yes, because I think that's a useful skill, but they're not going to fail the same way that you or I will. Like, you put you or I on a reverse banded hack, and we're going to get to a point where we fall out the machine. If I have a beginner on a hack and I take them to failure, it gets into a point where probably something else is broken down. They're lifting off the pad, or their feet are moving around all over the place, or they're taking 10 seconds between reps because they're absolutely shitting themselves with fear over the next rep. That's failure. And they don't need to go past that. But equally, because that's not true failure, I don't mind going to that point. It's probably like 2 or 3 reps in the tank. So in which case for them, it could be perfect.
Even if they could go to that level of failure, I still think beginners should go there. And so people will argue that beginners should go to failure because the recovery isn't as good as someone that's done this for a while. I think the recovery is better because they've got less muscle mass, so it's less of a demand on the nervous system. There's less load on it, so it's less of a demand on the nervous system. They're not generating as much intensity per rep because they're not skilled at the exercise. They can't execute well. And also, like, I would argue if I was training you, I would probably put a couple of reps in reserve because I know, right, you're going to train 5-6 days a week. You're consistently, you love it. You're running the red line. You train really hard. You're really efficient. If I put everything to failure, you would just fall to bits. There's no way. You wouldn't be able to do the rest of the week's worth of work. You just wouldn't recover.
Yeah.
Whereas if I said to a beginner, I want to leave 1 in the tank, what their 1 in the tank is 25 reps in the tank.
Yeah.
So how do you know where 1 in reserve is if you don't know where 0 in reserve is? You need to learn 0 first. And this is why I quite like challenge sets. First set, go to where you think 1 in the tank is. Second set, go to where you think 1 in the tank is. Third set, do as many as you can. Oh, you did an extra 15? Next week, go up. And eventually you'll find where that failure point, where their perceived viewpoint on failure matches real failure. And whether that's technical failure or muscular failure, we're just closing the gap. And what we're doing with these challenge sets is we're closing the gap anyway. So by the time we get to the point where we're with those, what they think is 1 rep in reserve probably is, their technical failure to muscular failure is probably a smaller gap than it was when it started. And then I'll run that for a while until the point where they're going, Simon, my sleep's not good, or I'm getting crazy DOMs. And then maybe I go, okay, pull a rep back. And then we'll go from there. Or I change the stimulus if they were the mad bastards that like training really, really hard. And I'll just go, oh, you're feeling nervous system? We'll do a volume phase. Oh, you're feeling crazy DOMs? We'll do a strength phase. For the people who just like this stuff. But, but that's application.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's a really interesting point in that as well, where you mentioned about redlining things. And I'm a big proponent for redline things for a period of time because you need to understand where that point is. Like, don't always leave so much in the tank with a client where you don't understand how hard you can push them. Like, I would rather, if it's someone trying to build muscle and it's overall volume through the week, I'd rather know what too much is because then I can come back from it. And if it's in a dieting phase with food, I'd rather know what too low a food is before hunger gets crazy, cravings get very high, training dips away, because we've got a reference point of what point to not go below. But don't get stuck in kind of being too safe with things because there could be quite a lot left in the tank that someone hasn't actually explored yet. And all that does is it limits that person. And that can be beginner right up to someone that's stepping on stage.
So before we click record, I said that I had something that I thought about when I went to RTS recently that really changed my mind about hypertrophy. And I was like, I'm going to talk about this live on air with you. Before I do that, I want to ask you one more question. So when it comes to the big levers to pull for hypertrophy, what do you think, certainly with anyone really, but certainly with beginners, what are the big things that coaches need to be focusing on with their clients? What are the things that are like, this needs to be done before you consider any of the fancy stuff?
How new are we talking here? Are we talking someone that's completely brand new or someone that's a few years in?
Well, let's do it for completely brand new, and then let's do it for someone with 2 to 3 years experience.
So someone who's completely brand new, the first thing I want to do is actually being able to control either their body weight or control load. And then with that, we're going to find technique and execution. Now, it doesn't really matter even what machine they're on. Like, say if it's comparing a leg extension to a bodyweight split squat, it's actually teach them how to go slowly with things, how to pause at certain points, how to actually control the change in direction within various different bits. Because if they haven't grasped that, they're not going to really be able to do that further down the line, because they're not going to want to step back to doing that. Like, if you've got someone who's brand new, who's just throwing things around and just moving for the sake of it, then we're only really going to get to a point where that's how that person trains. Whereas when you've got a beginner, you've basically got a puppy in front of you. We're like, look, we can get this stuff nailed, which means that you're then set now training-wise for life. And for me, the next step on that, when someone's been maybe 2 or 3 years into doing that, is mixing that with internal focus and actually being able to contract muscle at the same time. So say, for example, we got someone on a leg extension is always quite an easy example as an isolation. We've been through, can we get them controlling top of the rep, bottom of the rep, controlling the eccentric, controlling the concentric, so it's not just throwing the thing. Can we do all that stuff and actually get that person contracting their quads at the same time? Because if we bring all these things together, we've probably got a pretty damn good set. And then the next step from there is we actually look at, right, can we load it? Can we progress it? Can we do all those things that come further up? But that's the foundations, in my opinion.
I completely agree with you. Like, if you think about progressive overload, I don't think everyone talks about progressive overload, no one talks about acute overload. I think if we want a progressive overload, we need to make sure that acute overload is there. Can you take that set to where it needs to be to create a stimulus? So can I contract tissue? Can I move with control? And then from there, can I take that close to failure? When I've got that, then we look at how do we progress that stimulus from that point. But that's the big thing. So I want to finish up going over some programming stuff from the coach's side of things. But I want to go through this thing about in RTS first. So
I'm so excited to know what this question is.
Yeah. So I thought this was doing RTS. I said it's blown every coach's mind that I've discussed this with. So every coach talks about progressive overload and how getting stronger is important to build muscle, right? So the narrative that I'm getting from that is, in order to build muscle, I need to be lifting more weight, right? That is my progression. I get strong. If I get stronger, I build muscle. That's this equals X equals Y. Mm-hmm. What I've started to realize is, no, Y equals X. So if you think, right, the strength improvements we get from hypertrophy come mostly after like nervous system skill things, it's because we have a better anatomical pulley. Mm-hmm. So again, if we talk about, I'll go back to Boney here. This guy isn't going to have the leverage right now because it's completely flat to bring this arm across with much power. But if I did this, I now have a better anatomical pulley for this pec to bring the arm around the rib cage, right? Mm-hmm. So we're thinking getting stronger is a driver of hypertrophy. Like, we should be getting stronger to get bigger. But I reckon we get bigger and that gets us stronger. So actually, the actual thing that's driving hypertrophy is probably proximity to failure. Because if I took you today and then I took you to Disneyland, gave you some marijuana and got you laid, you would be stronger probably the next day than if I made you really depressed. If I chilled you out too much just before the session, you would lift less load than I gave you some heavy metal. So there's so many factors that affect strength, but you can still create a stimulus in that workout, right? You wouldn't say sack it off going, oh, I can't beat my log book today. It's the proximity to failure. If I get proximity to failure on 100 kilos, and then next week at 90, and then next week 110, I've still created the same stimulus. We've created more torque, arguably, but I think actually the strength improvements we get is because of the growth of the muscle, rather than the strength causes the growth of the muscle.
That's like a chicken or the egg scenario, that, isn't it? Jesus.
It's interesting, right?
I got bigger, which meant I got stronger, which meant I got bigger. It's like this perfect, like, eternal loop. No, but that's actually a really interesting way of looking at it. Because and actually I can give you some practical experience in that as well. So compared to maybe a year ago, I'm probably about 20 kilos down in body weight. So naturally, we look at things like ribcage size when it comes to piston mechanics, etc. I'm going to now be in a much weaker position. So the loads that I'm lifting now are going to be significantly reduced compared to that, or at least reduced compared to that. But then at the same time, the way I look at it, like my head looking at it is, well, I'm now going to be in a weaker position. So if I'm lifting less, it's not an issue because I'm still got the ability to potentially lifting more relative to what I was lifting then, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So say pressing the 50s with bigger ribcage compared to pressing the 40s with a smaller ribcage, the 40s could well actually be stronger.
It's an interesting thing as well when you look at it. It's the good thing about this is that it gives people a bit of like if your client feels disheartened they haven't lifted the same weight as last week, you can go, do you know what, this isn't actually as important as you think. Don't worry about it. As long as you're working hard, we're getting that stimulus. So it could be a great way to frame disappointing to a client on your situation, rather than thinking, oh, the weight's going down, it must be getting smaller. Like, not necessarily. You maybe are, but like you're not necessarily. But on the flip side of that, then it's like, oh, what am I tracking? Because I was tracking load. That's the most easiest thing to track. And I suppose it doesn't mean you don't track load. It's just like the increase in load necessarily is still a byproduct. So it's like it shows the muscle has gotten bigger, even if even if it shatters your view of progressive overload.
Oh, this is...
You're going to be thinking about that all day now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm not going to sleep tonight because it's 7:45 p.m. I needed this in the morning when I had a coffee in me. I genuinely never thought of it in that sense.
Yeah.
Oh,
so going on to...
I love those RTS like discoveries that you just suddenly have. It's almost like it opens your brain up to think about things in different ways.
And this is why people should do education.
Yeah, 100%. And I remember I was on the first time. What was it called? The first RTS course, the first time at Michael, it was Luke Hoffman, obviously friend of Moss Mentors, was on the same course. That's actually when we first met, and I remember it was on that. I think like the second practical weekend potentially. We went through hip banding and RDL. So you got a band set up at the rack, and you've got the band across your hips, and you're essentially hip thrusting into that. And kind of Michael put it out to the group, was like, is that actually adding any challenge? Kind of what is it doing? Are there any benefits to having this thing on here? And we were like, yeah, because you get contraction, you're pushing against it. And he was like, from a mechanical perspective, it's literally doing nothing. It's just testing your ability to stand up. And we were all like, like head blown type thing, being like, holy shit, he's right. Like almost, but then you're like, well, what are my feelings during my contraction? Because I'm contracting into that, I'm feeling my glutes, feeling my hamstrings, etc. Like, where does that come from? Like, it's amazing when you do this stuff and you start exploring it, how much your eyes get open to it, and it kind of challenges your way of thinking. And you're like, here we go. Like,
I agree with that. The same thing we spoke about about the hip thrust, right? Everyone talks about the hip thrust being this great glute exercise, and you think of it because it's similar, exactly the same as the hip band and RDL. We're pushing into the load so that creates more contraction. Now, that intent could create more of a stimulus, so I'm not ruling it out entirely. But where is that line of force coming from? Is it coming from so people talk about the line of force. People are just new to moment arms. You were talking about the distance between the line of force and the axis of rotation. And in free weights, that line of force is always straight down from the load. Okay. The thing I would say for this is that if it's moving away from the midline, it's coming straight down from the line of resistance. So on a press, I will measure the moment arm, the distance from the line of force and the dumbbell, or a lateral raise. When it's a hip thrust or a split squat, your line of force comes where your contact points with the floor are. So your feet and your shoulders on a hip thrust, and your front foot and back foot on a split squat. So now that weight is just adding to, if you're 100 kilos, and I give you 250 kilo dumbbells, you are now 200 kilos of load, but it's still coming through front foot, back foot, or foot and shoulder. And that's when you start looking at hip thrust and go, it's as much for a quad challenge as it is a hip challenge. And if you can play around with that with intent to a degree, but it's closer to a leg press than it is to an incline hyper.
Yeah. Which is mad.
This is mad.
But it also, you know what it is? It's mad, but it's also not mad. Because how often do you get clients saying they feel their quads on a hip thrust?
And you can play around with intent with that. You can play around intent with that by driving straight down or pulling back to get more hamstrings. But when you load that up, eventually there's going to be a point where everything just needs to fire. So you're going to get that.
Yeah.
You'll never get that with a incline hyper.
If you're thinking too hard about intent, like if someone say get their max hip thrust load for 6 reps and get them to absolutely nail that intent of pulling their heels back towards them on a hip thrust, no chance. You're sacrificing load to be able to do that. So you kind of go, well, it's like
100%. So going into programming, like, what is your thought process about building a hypertrophy block? Do you periodize your programs when you think long term? Like, how do you actually start to build out this? Because it's a long term goal.
It is, and it's interesting this because this is the stuff I actually enjoy the most, which I think is quite rare in the industry at the minute because people seem to be like, oh, how can I get a short term result and how can I do this? I'm like, no, give me someone for 2 years. Let me get massive. That's so much fun. And even like I know firsthand coaches when it comes to check-ins where you've been coaching someone for 9 months and there's not a huge amount to go through. Like it gets to the point in a check-in feedback video where it's just a bit like, oh yeah, just do the same thing again. I'm like, no, I'm getting excited for the little details. Like all those little cool bits that we can kind of go into. Now, the first thing that I will always look at is I'll do a little assessment in terms of where someone is at now, what they've been doing recently, and ultimately what I'm going to change for them now moving forwards. Because there's a bit of context to that. So majority of the clients that will come to me typically now will be coaches or people that have been training for a decent period of time. It's not that I don't enjoy training newer people, it's just that's not typically what I'm working with now. So if I'm working with a client, it's going to be someone that has been consistently training for a period. So we've got that bit of data that we can then use. But inevitably there'll be changes that we need to make to that because there's a good chance that quite a lot of it wasn't working. So we look at training split, we look at exercise selection, we look at total volume, we look at how that volume is spread across all these different bits. We'll look at tempo, we look at all these different factors and kind of be like, right, within this first block, I'm just going to get those things that are slightly off and I'm going to make them better. And for some people, that could be quite a lot of changes. For some people, it could just be a case of, right, let's make a couple of little tinkers here and then run with that for X amount of time. And then typically what I'll do in terms of periodizing is I don't actually have that written down in advance. I do it more a case of, right, as we start moving through a training block, I'm starting to predict in my head what's typically going to need changing. So say, for example, if it's someone who has a decent amount of compound movements within the programming and it's someone that can train, we're going to reach a point where, like you said earlier, like if you were training me, like someone whose nervous system is going to start to get fried. Okay, when are we thinking about potentially needing to deload? When are we thinking about potentially moving volume landmarks because that overall neural stress from what they're doing is actually going up? And it's almost like this kind of constant maneuvering through that where it's like, right, throughout this training block, okay, we're going to keep things the same for as long as we can. These are the changes that I think are going to come through. These are the signs that we're going to need to make that change. Okay, I've got those in my head that I'm looking out for. As soon as they come in, we'll make a little tinker and then we'll push on again. And it's almost like constantly moving through waves and going through cycles of that, where it's the overall setup can actually remain relatively similar for a decent period of time, but it's more just kind of like adapting and adjusting around the times of what's required at a certain point. And one thing I'll typically explain to my guys and girls is we're normally going to be on a training block for a decent period of time. Like I want them getting stuck into this block for as long as possible so they can just get their head down, they can just work. Because I don't want to be changing things every 4 weeks and putting brand new exercises in for them because it just gets a bit slow and they're having to learn things and they're not really building any momentum. But at the same time, if we do run with things for 9 months and nothing changes, like anyone's going to get bored. So it's like, right, what are we going to have to tinker with as we go through? As we then make those tinkers, I'll get flipping excited and I'll go in on them with people and be like, right, I did this recently with someone. They have progressed really well for that initial 12 or 13 weeks. We made a couple of little tinkers and all we really changed would be pull down some of his rep ranges. And the way I kind of sold that to him and got him excited for it. It's like, mate, you've got strong as an orchestra in this first block. You're naturally now going to be in a position where when you go into those slightly lower rep ranges, you're going to be able to take advantage of that, and it's going to suit how strong you've been able to get. Perfect. Let's make that bit of a change, and then we'll run with that. And then inevitably, we'll make another little change in 12, 13 weeks, and then we move through periods of time like that. Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting method that's not really a method, if that makes sense. Like I'm sure there'll be other coaches that will contradict this and go against it, but I will have an idea of how things will look probably a few months into the future, but it's never written down and just in the case of this is what you're going to have in your next training block and go, because I've got a person in front of me. That person's not going to be in the same place 3 months' time that they're in now.
Well, to play that devil's advocate, because I would be the person that would, I very much agree with you. And I'd also be the person that would also be that person that disagrees with you, because I do plan long term. And I think for me, I work with coaches now almost entirely. Like I don't really have any, I have 3 clients. But those people are a bit more Gen Pop people, right? They've trained a little bit longer, but I'm not working with coaches too much. So there is that element of showing somebody where that path is, showing someone where we're going in the next 6-12 months is the great thing for retention. And I also see a lot of coaches that because the biggest lever in a dieting phase is nutrition and lifestyle stuff, they don't talk about training, and they wonder why the retention disappears after 3 months. It's like, well, why am I staying? You've not taught people to love training, that you get excited about that. Whereas about your guys, because you're getting into this stuff, they're going, I wonder what Alex is going to do next. So I also really like periodization from a coach's perspective. You said at the start of this, exercise selection, people are getting so caught up in it. And I think if we can periodize and we can choose, right, what's the stimulus that we're looking for? And to use the old Pollock one, strength, functional hypertrophy, strength, endurance. I'm not going to do 3 sets of 15 deadlifts, but I might do 3 sets of 15 leg extensions. I'm not going to do 5 sets of 5 leg extensions. So me periodizing makes it easier from a coach perspective, so I can cut, like giving a meal plan rather than macros to tie everything together. I've basically taken every exercise in the world and go, here's the pool you can choose from. And then you can get nerdy about how I manipulate those. And that's how I help coaches find the fun like you're doing. Because rather than being, oh my God, I've got every exercise, don't know where to start. Oh, it's too much, I'm burnt out. To going, right, I've got these 3 to 5 exercises. Which one's right? That one. Okay. And how am I going to perform that one? And then they're like, oh, this is fun. Because we've like, I used an analogy the other day on my Instagram stories about using a system. It's like, if I said to you, go outside and find somebody, I didn't tell you who they were, what their name was, or what they looked like, you'd be like, nah, where do I start with that? Simon, I'm not doing that. Whereas if we played a game of Guess Who, you would find it fun because we've created parameters that allows you to find somebody. So I like that periodization, but it's like with Gen Pop, it's always going to be very loose because you're not going to get somebody who's going to be consistent training every day that you want to. They're going to have business trips. They're going to change goals because they've booked a last minute trip to Corfu and they want to look shredded now. So it's like, I'll set a path for them and then that'll go the next quarter. But I'm totally open to going, do you know what? If you're enjoying this first phase, this whole first phase could be the quarter. I'll pull the pin on phase 2 if and when we need it. And if this first phase takes a year and you're enjoying it, I'm happy for it too. The plan is there. I just pull the pin on when I make that adjustment when it needed. And similar thing to yourself, like how do we talk about that? You mentioned like, I often use, rather than a deload, I often will go into a strength phase. So over a block, I will build volume, build volume, build volume, build volume. I will see when someone's nervous system starts to struggle. And then I'll do a strength block and I may move into some bigger compound lifts. And then I'll get on a call and go, right, after that strength block, tell me what you enjoyed, tell me what you didn't like, tell me what muscles you want to grow now. And we've now got this great base level of numbers that I can go, right, where are your weakest lifts? So when I build the next hypertrophy block, I'm basing on what you want to grow, what I think you need to grow for physique balance, and what are the lifts that we're limiting. Oh yeah, your front squat sucked and your bench sucked, but your back exercise and your deadlifts are great. Cool, we're going to do more of the former in your next phase. So the strength phase acts as a deload from all the volume, but at the same time creates that information. And then I often very much look at photos. So if I look at somebody's photos on a week basis and I want to make an adjustment, but I don't want to wholesale change things, I will kind of look at the photo and go, look, if you see how your tricep looks here, do you see how your triceps make your biceps look smaller? Because we're only as big as our smallest body part, right? My arms make my back look smaller. My dominant back does not make my arms look bigger. So I will then go, I will throw in an extra bicep exercise on day 2. And that's my adjustment. You know, like I'm just trying to add balance. Or oh, I'm going to switch up a back exercise to a pure rear delt one because I want to build your rear delts up.
Yeah.
And that's all it is, final tweaks.
But it's so fun. Yes. And I think, we spoke about like the foundation of programming. This is the foundation of coaching. This is the fun stuff that we like getting stuck into. And again, this bleeds across to how you actually coach people. Because this is where, if you're passionate about something as a coach, it comes across in terms of the purpose that you give the person afterwards. Exactly like you said there. If you've got that person that's going into a strength block and then they move back into a hypertrophy phase, and you're like, right, we're going to look to build these muscle groups now because they need to balance out things a little bit more. You're going to tell that person. And you're going to then get them excited when they go into those sessions because they're like, oh, I've suddenly got a reason to do this. It's not just going in the gym and training. It's, I've got this set up here because I'm trying to grow this specifically. And I've got these number of sessions for the week because I'm trying to grow this specifically. So they're going to go into those sessions and they're going to get after them. And they're going to have a wicked time doing it rather than just going there and being like, oh, here I go again.
Yeah.
And that's, when that happens, when they get to that point where they're just kind of ticking things over, clients leave.
Yeah.
They're not sticking around. Whereas if you and I are like, mate, I'm so excited for these next 2 or 3 months because we've got this that we're going to be going into, and then this is going to happen, and then food's going to come up a little bit more because we need to balance out the extra training volume we've got in there. Then they're going to be like, oh yeah, I can't wait for this as well. And they're going to make so much more progress.
I completely agree. So to finish off, we talked about exercise selection. I want to kind of go into a little bit of exercise analysis just to close off. So in your opinion, what is the most overrated upper body and lower body exercise?
Overrated upper body.
Should I give my mind whilst you're having a think?
Yeah, I'm going to say that's an on-the-spot one, that is.
Yeah. So mine's by far the dumbbell pullover.
Yes, I see that.
So
I'm not going to lie, this is going to be really difficult because, we said about finding the good things and the bad things.
We don't have a good and bad.
In my head, I can still find 4, 5, 6 reasons to program a dumbbell pullover.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's a loaded stretch for lats, loaded stretch for the pecs. It can encourage some overhead range. It potentially encourage some thoracic extension if we even are looking for thoracic extension, because that's another big thing when you start learning anatomy. The thoracic spine isn't built for extension. Like I did a seminar on my stories the other day. When people see people do these big back bridges. The thoracic doesn't move much. It's all the lumbar.
That's interesting.
So if you ever look at it, right, you see massive amount of lumbar extension, and then there's this flat thoracic spine. I'll send you some photos after this, and you'll be like, "Oh my god, that makes so much sense."
Come on, Simon, I've got to try and sleep tonight. You've already blown my head once. I can't take a second one of these.
But if you look at that double pullover, right, in this position, how much lat we getting? Not really. It's all pec. Okay. And then we get to here, pec drops off, lat drops off. This is pointless. We're training in this. If I put a rope pullover, I now have something.
Yeah, I like that. What's your lower body one?
Sissy squats.
As in body weight or machine?
Machine, but both.
Mate, every time I think of a machine one, in the heel supporter one, I just think of that dude whose knee exploded. He's doing, horrendous.
I've done matrix shit off it, when you're doing like this sort of stuff. But I feel that the machine sissy squat isn't a sissy squat. It's just a squat that you don't load.
And sit really far back on.
Yeah.
But people lean forwards, and it's like, no.
Do that. You can do the same knee flexion on a hack squat with load. Then the sissy, I like a sissy squat as a loaded stretch to open up the rec fem, but it's just not loadable. So I will program it, like you said. I understand it, but I'm like, it wouldn't be my first choice for quads, even if it's more stretch.
Yes. Yeah. Right, I've actually got to give mine now. Okay. I'm trying to go through muscle groups and think, wow, what could be going in here? See, this, what's interesting with this as well, this changes a lot. It almost goes through waves in terms of, right, what's actually more and less beneficial. Decline barbell press.
Ooh, why?
There's no range for the majority of people.
Agree with that.
I'll put any fixed bar decline press
Yeah.
Because the bar itself is going to hit someone's ribcage before they can actually get any decent range from it. And
Fair.
that movement we can replicate with various other things. And it's typically guys will just use it, and it's dudes who do this because they can just load the hell out of it. Like, go into any pure gym around the country, and there'll be one dude on a Smith machine doing a decline press, sitting like this sort of incline, with like 4 plates aside, being like, "Boys, look how strong I am," and he's just doing this because that's what we've got.
I'll throw another one in there for that exact thing. Dips for triceps.
Yes.
There's no moment arm to the elbow.
No.
Great, but it's a good chest exercise. Good front delt exercise. Good to be able to train in shoulder extension if you can tolerate it.
Yes.
But as a pure tricep exercise, there's better.
And then lower body. I'm trying to get ones that aren't the obvious.
Barbell hip thrust.
All I'm picturing is someone going sideways on a leg press, but that's too easy. We can get a bit more controversial than that.
Barbell hip thrust, kickbacks.
Barbell hip thrust was up there because people do them wrong. Because people don't actually get what they should be getting from them. I'm trying to think, there must be a squat or leg press pattern that's useless. Or even application of banding something.
Mine used to be the glute kickback. And now I've learnt some appreciation for it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it goes in waves, isn't it?
It's a short range challenge. And
Yeah.
it's not loadable, but if I started as A1 glute kickback, that's silly. But if I had D1 glute kickback after all the heavy stuff, then fair.
Yeah.
I would have a chest support, though. Most people don't have a chest support on glute kickback, so I don't understand why.
Yeah, they're just trying to hold on. Like, there's no point. Curtsy lunges will definitely be up there as well.
Interesting, yeah.
People thinking they're getting more glute, you're like, you're just going to snap your knees in half on these. But I'm actually going to go for, because of how often they get butchered, Bulgarian split squats.
I like that.
I love them, but I think that I see them done badly more than I see them being done well.
You also sacrifice stability for load a lot of the time as well.
And I'm saying this partly because I did them 2 days ago and I'm in absolute pieces as well. So they're automatically a bastard. But there's more stuff going on than I think people expect. So like with how high up the back foot is, with stride length, with torso lean, with hip position, there's so many different things. And again, people go to extremes. They're like, I'm going to make this a glute challenge. So then take the longest stride in the world. So they're getting 2 inches of range. They'll lean massively forwards, so they're getting 2 inches of range. And it's like, just do a normal split squat and you'll probably get more from it.
Yeah, almost certainly. You get a little bit extra range for your hip, for a bit of moment arm for your hip. But if you did that flat on the floor with more stability with a slight forward lean, you'd load it more.
Yeah. So yeah, Bulgarians are my one.
So one last question I ask everybody.
Yes.
But I'm going to make it hypertrophy specific because I asked you this last time. What's one thing in regards to programming for hypertrophy that you've changed your mind on?
Warm-ups.
Explain.
I used to very much be in the headspace of all you need to warm up is the exercise you're going to be doing first. So like, say for example, if someone's going into first exercise, whatever it might be, they do a couple of sets of that, get some blood moving, and they'll be ready to train. Whereas over the last few months, I'm like, no. That's why people are hurting themselves a lot nowadays. And people need to do various other things beyond just getting some blood shifting around. They need to set the correct position they're going to be training through. They need to open up potentially a little bit of range at certain joints. Like, one thing I've been going to recently with my own training, with a chap called Dave Marsh. I don't know if you know Dave, who is currently coaching me. Is I was the classic, like, massively, like, so my kind of essentially muscle mass around my lower back was decent because I was so, like, ribcage forwards, like, whichever way, anterior posteriorly tilted, like, in that position, because I was walking around like that and I was sitting in a chair like that, and I've been told to think chest up during most of my exercises. So we've had to do quite a lot of work kind of resetting that essentially and bringing that back down. And I was like, from doing that and doing a little bit of opening out stuff, kind of posterior breathing before I train, I feel amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is how I should feel. And now if I have to rush the session and rush my warm-up and prep work, which is only 10 minutes max, I notice it within my movements. I'm like, this feels awful. And it's not.
And the key thing you had there was doing the breath work and then loading that position.
Oh yeah.
Most people do breath work to move and then it goes back because you always do more bad breath than good breath because it's something you do all the time. But I do the exact same thing. When I look at pressing, right, what are the joint managers? Well, I'll do something for Ron Boys on Cybex Bravo. I will do some serratus anterior work. I will do some external rotation work, and then I'll go into my press. All the things that lock that glenohumeral joint in place, and then I'll be more stable and I'll feel good going into that pressing exercise.
Yeah, yeah. And there'll be so many people who don't think about the stuff and don't implement it, and they're then going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Because they'll do the same thing that I did for far too many years, where it's, I can train around that. I can just pick something else that doesn't hurt, and I'll be fine. And it's like, yeah, but then it gets to the point where you can't do anything.
I've been there.
Yeah. But I've only been able to deadlift from the floor and actually do a bench press to my actual chest, and I've got the longest arms in the world, but to my chest in the last couple of months, and I haven't been able to do that for 3-4 years.
Wow, massive improvement.
Yeah, and granted, like I said, I've got arms longer than most people's torsos, but.
And deadlift to the floor, you're about 9'4", so does that?
9'5", actually, 9'5".
Okay, sorry. Yeah, exactly. That's a long way to go. So, for people to learn more about Pro Coach or the ICM, where are people finding you?
So they can find me on Instagram on Alex_TeamProCoach. So I'm a physique coach at Team Pro Coach. So you can search for Team Pro Coach. People may well have heard of it, and they will probably have heard of Cal. But myself, Cal, and Ryan, who I also work with, have also recently launched a coaching education platform called the ICM Education. So that's just the ICM Education on Instagram, which has been going for about 3 months now. So any coaches out there who want to learn a few bits and bobs.
And we said before we started with this lack of competition stuff, right? What you guys are doing is great education at such low ticket, low barriers to entry that it's a great place to start. And if people then want to go and learn more, I have a more intense version of the same thing. I've got coaches that I'm pretty certain are on both, and they're going to get value from it. So it's definitely worth having a look at.
No, thank you, mate. I appreciate it.
No, mate. But Alex, absolute pleasure, and I'll catch you soon.
I do. Thank you very much.